course schedule, but there it is. So we got a break day, okay, and then you see the last quiz for the unit is due, then comes the exam, and then your study guide that goes with the exam. Okay, so next Tuesday is exam day, unit 3. All right, I'm trying to be inspiring, but whatever, it is what it is. Okay, so today we're going to talk some incredibly cool things in psych when we pick up on some of this social psychology. Social psychology is one of the courses I really enjoy teaching the most. And I was teaching the social psychology course in this department for a bunch of years. And then wouldn't you know it, one of our professors was actually in the provost for 15 years. But he came back to us, and he's actually a social psychologist, so he took over teaching the course. And I mean, I guess that's fair, since his actual degree is in social psychology. So we started talking about some of the attribution theory and who we are, and I want to move into attitudes and persuasion. Attitudes are interesting, right? Feelings, ideas, of beliefs, but clearly attitudes influence our behaviors. I have an attitude towards squid, it's creepy, it affects my behavior, I avoid it, right? It's pretty straightforward. Your attitudes impact your behaviors, okay? We find that attitudes, though they predict behaviors, you need to look at an aggregate, okay? So, for example, I've got my attitude towards squid, but I was on a job interview one time, and this guy takes me to this restaurant, and he orders calamari. You know what calamari is, right? It's a fancy name for squid, okay? And you know what I did at that restaurant on a job interview? I ate the calamari. You got it? But if you look at the number of times I have decided to reject squid in my own home, you will know that though it does not predict every single behavior, but it does predict general trends in behavior, okay? All right. Where do attitudes come from? In a lot of ways, they come from parents, okay? You know, just as far as attitudes go, if you find somebody who's a racist, chances are pretty damn high that their parents are as well, all right? It's probably going to be that way. Not 100%, but probably. You find classical conditioning is often used for attitudes, and this is really marketing right here, right? You can use operant conditioning, where teachers and parents will use rewards to change attitudes in children, often from direct exposure. Absolutely. The more you get exposed to it, the more positive your attitudes tend to be. We find that it's clear that attitudes can impact the behaviors you exhibit, but the behaviors you exhibit can also change your attitudes. Okay? So the three big ones here: the foot in the door, role playing, and cognitive dissonance. And so what happens is that in some studies, what they do is they go to a neighborhood and they knock on doors and say, "Would you volunteer at the homeless shelter?" And as you can imagine, most people say, "No, I will not volunteer at the homeless shelter." That's a pretty big ask. So in a different neighborhood, they go through and they knock on doors. Will you sign this petition to increase funding for the local homeless shelter? Okay? Most people go, "Oh yeah, sure, I'll sign that." Okay? Then come through a week later and ask people to volunteer. And they're much more likely to volunteer now. Because they gave that first little favor, they're much more likely to give a big one. Okay? And so this is the idea being, you know, of course, if you need to borrow $500 from your parents, ask for $10 first. Right? Then go for the 500. Yeah, I like it. Role playing. In a very famous study, Phil Zimbardo took Stanford University male students, and over spring break they volunteered to be in an experiment where they would be either prisoners or guards in like a prison setting. Okay? And so what happened was that they were randomly assigned, right? I mean, anybody could be anybody, and they housed them in department offices, they made jail cells, and then, you know, the guards would take shifts, whereas the prisoners were stuck. They're there all day. And it was just amazing. At first, they were just playing a game together. But within 2 days, they fit their roles so well that the guards started to abuse the prisoners, and the prisoners took a very I deserve it kind of attitude towards it, and it was just the very act of playing these roles changes your attitude. And I can tell you this, that when I was younger, my attitude towards fast cars was, give me more please, right? I like it. After playing the role of father for a few years, my attitude towards fast cars has radically shifted, okay? So the role I play has clearly changed my attitude. Okay? When it comes to persuasion, okay, this is all about changing attitudes. That's really what persuasion is. And clearly this is the intersection between psychology and marketing. Right? This is marketing 101. Okay? And the key to persuasion is very clear. Number one, know your audience. Because if you want to persuade an audience, you need to know who they are. And it turns out that some audiences are motivated. They're analytical. They think. Some audiences are not motivated. They don't want to put a lot of thought. They don't want to put any effort into it. Okay? I'm sorry to tell you, this is a Donald Trump rally. Okay? And so how does Donald Trump persuade people like this? He gives them very, very low effort. Very, very low effort things. Lock her up. Lock her up. I mean, no cognitive thought required. Okay? If your audience is much more motivated and analytical, then you can have a much more thought out argument. Okay? And you get a lasting change in attitude. And so if you're trying to market, I mean, that's what persuasion is, right? I mean, or marketing is. You want to persuade people that your product is worth giving up this many dollars, right? It's pretty straightforward. And guess what? If you're trying to sell a soda, you probably want to go here. No, here, my bad. You probably want to go here if you're trying to sell soda. But if you're trying to sell a new computer, you ought to be using this method. Okay? So the product that you're selling or the audience that you're working with will determine which of these is perhaps more effective. Okay? Come on. So we find that right here in the United States, we have, this is basically how you vote in the United States. You get some privacy. The key is that we need to avoid people voting based on a pressure to be like others. Okay? And this is a tough thing right now, but conformity is this notion of changing your behavior to fit with a group standard of this sort. Okay? And we can talk about a couple of different ways. I mean, we'll talk about mimicry very briefly, the society we are in, and influences around us. Like, say, for example, one of my favorites is in Japan, they have a proverb that says, the nail that sticks up will be pounded back down. So in Japan, they are really telling you, you better conform. You better be like us. You better be like the rest of the group. If you stick out, we will pound you back down, right? But in the United States, we have an interesting phrase, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. If you want something to happen, be different, right? That's what you gotta do. So radically different responses in two different cultures to conformity. So in some way, we find people become like each other, or people find each other and act like each other. One of the most interesting conformity ones that I every time I hear this, I can't believe it. If you take a group of women that are unrelated to each other and haven't lived together, their menstrual cycles will line up within a month. I don't know how that's possible. I mean, but that is the ultimate conformity right there. It's just amazing thing How can their biology just shift like that? Right? Wow, that is very, very interesting. Okay? But another very, very famous study in psychology, Solomon Asch does this study where, here's the basic idea. Okay? I'm going to show you this standard line and 3 comparisons, 1, 2, 3. You tell me which one matches the standard line. And so obviously the answer is 2, right? Pretty easy? Pretty easy. So now they're going to do this over and over and over. And when people are asked to do this, they're correct like 99.9% of the time. It's an easy task. You got it? So now, they bring people in. They bring in, I think they brought in 7 total people. Okay, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay? It turns out that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7 all work for the researcher. They all work for Solomon Asch. Okay? And so what's going to happen is on certain trials, they're going to do this in public. They're going to say, which one matches? At first, you know, what was the criteria? 2. So 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Everybody's cool, no problem. Then they get to another one, and look at this. 3, 3, 3, 3, and look at this dude. See this? He's just like, what? Wait a minute. No, wait, no, dude, it's 2. What's he going to say? Okay? And it turns out that even though we know this guy knows the answer, I mean, he knows the answer. You see this? He's checking that sucker out. He knows the answer. Yet, about 1/3 of the time, this guy says the wrong answer. Okay? That's conformity right there. Okay? We find that in this interesting, why? Because it's a social norm. We do it because everybody else is doing it and we don't want to be different. You know, when they repeated this study in Asia, again, a very conforming nation, it was crazy. I've seen the videos. It was from Japan. And, you know, they give the wrong answer. 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. This guy does not hesitate, does not even blink. It says 3 every time. Never even gives that look right there. Doesn't even, you know, just automatically conforms to it. Interesting. Stanley Milgram, however, he took conformity and he brought it one step further into obedience. Stanley Milgram had looked at history. He had looked at Nazi Germany. And he had seen the concentration camps. He had seen the things that had happened in Nazi Germany. It just, you know, the American people were just like, what is wrong with the people in Germany? Are they just defective? Is there something wrong with them? How could that happen? Okay? And so Stanley Milgram said, okay, number one, I want to step back and say, those Nazi soldiers, 2 weeks before they were killing Jewish people, that dude was a baker. He was just an average, ordinary citizen. Okay? I don't think an average, ordinary baker is somehow defective by nature. I think we better explore this a little bit, figure out what's going on. So he set up a pretty fascinating study where he comes in, and there are two people that come in, and he uses a coin. It's rigged, but he uses a coin to determine which of these 2 people are going to be a teacher and which is going to be a learner. Now it's rigged so that this guy is an actor that works for Stanley Milgram. And so what's going to happen is the actor will always be the learner. And so this guy who's the teacher is a person from the street. Huh? But again, it's just an average person. It's just like the baker is an average guy. Okay? And so he's going to say, okay, I want to test the effects of electric shock on learning. Okay? So what's going to happen is you're going to go through and you're going to teach the learner, you know, you're going to teach them, and it'll be pairs, okay? So you say table, window, okay? Got a pair. And so now later on, I say table, and the learner has to say window. You get the idea? It's just pairs of words that go together. So now, when the learner makes a mistake, you need to give them electric shock because we're testing the effects of electric shocks on learning ability, okay? All right. And every time that you give a shock, you need to increase the intensity of the shock. Okay, the first shock is 15 volts, then it's 30, then it's 45, up to 450. He even labeled this thing, this device here, you know, slight, moderate, strong, dangerous, severe. Look at this, XXX, doesn't even give a name. And so what happens is inevitably at some point, well, oh, this guy's got a script too. At certain points he yells, "Ow, my heart!" You know, he says very specific things. Right? And at some point, this person here is going to start to hesitate. It's going to say, "Well, are you sure this is okay? Please continue." That's the Stanley Milgram. That's all he does. Is he has 4 scripted phrases. Please continue. This is science. The study demands you finish. Something like that. Just 4 phrases. If they continue to say, "Wait, no, something's not right here," stop. That's the end of the study. So Stanley Milgram put this together, and he asked a bunch of scientists, "How far do you think people would be willing to shock another human being?" They go, "Oh, maybe up in here, but that's about it." Okay? Well, it turned out that, in fact, by far the majority, what is this, 70% went all the way to the end. Okay? It was to the point here where, in fact, when they got somewhere around 400 volts, this guy didn't even respond anymore. Didn't even get any answers. Nothing was coming out of it. And Stanley Milgram, you know, they're like, "Well, what should I do?" You know, if he doesn't get a response, that's incorrect. Continue shocking him and move on. And I mean, for all they know, they killed him, made him pass out at minimum, and you know, all it took was a guy in a white lab coat saying, "Science demands it." Now, just imagine Nazi Germany. There was no white lab coat and "Science demands it." There was another soldier there with a gun saying, "You will join the army and you will do these horrible things or you will die." Okay? White lab coat, you know. So all of a sudden it makes a lot of sense. It explains how Nazi Germany could have occurred, right? How a perfectly ordinary guy who was baking bread last week is shooting people in the head this week. It's not a surprise, it's not uncommon, it's actually quite common. Okay? So it was really quite a powerful thing. And it was just amazing. It was just amazing. If he wasn't wearing a lab coat, they didn't obey him nearly as often. Do you know why psychologists wear white lab coats? To keep rat pee off of our nice clothing. That's it. That's why we would ever wear a lab coat. There's no reason otherwise. It turned out that the university, he was working at Yale University. If he said he was working at some community college, they wouldn't obey him. Something about Yale, and they were like, "Oh, it's Yale, so it must be important," right? And there was a variety of others as well, but it was just crazy how much. And so he makes it pretty clear, it's not the person, it's the situation, okay? People will do things that they never thought they could possibly do. Cruel and evil, it's the situation, okay? So, anyway. We find that the individual's behaviors in groups can be modified. Okay? Here's a good one. Social facilitation is the idea that when other people are watching us, our performance improves. That in some ways we get better with an audience. Okay? There's something about it. But it turns out that it's not always true, because with social loafing, the more people that are around, the worse we get. Okay, wait a minute. We find that social facilitation occurs if you are identifiable, okay? You are an individual player, and everybody can see the performance that you are exhibiting. Got it? They know if you pass the ball, if you made a shot, they know. Okay? In some situations, like group projects, okay? Group projects, the kind, you got 5 people in the group, and you get a group grade at the end, but nobody really knows who did what. You know what I'm talking about? Then you get this notion of social loafing. Okay? In the original study on social loafing, they had a tug-of-war machine. They got a rope and they could pull on it and measure how much pull was on it. So they had people pull on the machine by themselves, and let's say they could pull 100 pounds. That was a simple number. Then what happens is they blindfold them, and they put them in a team, okay? But what happens is that everybody else on the team doesn't pull at all. And the only one pulling is the original guy. And it turns out if he pulls 100 pounds by himself, if he thinks there's 5 other people on his team, he only pulls 70 pounds. It's like, we know you can do 100, but it was just like if there were 2 other people, then he pulls 80 pounds. If there's 3 other people, he pulls 70. It just kind of increases as it went. So it's pretty interesting thing right there. So if your output is not identifiable, okay, de-individuation is crazy too. This is situations where we lose our self-awareness, we lose our self-restraint. In an incredibly scary study, they took women from Columbia University, and they put them together in a group, put them around, and they put one unlucky girl in the middle, and she's going to receive electric shock. Okay? And now the girls are going to talk to each other about how much electric shock the girl in the middle is going to get. All right? This sounds crazy to me, okay? And they're like, oh no, we don't want to hurt her. No. Then they repeat the study, and now they put hoods on the girls, kind of like Ku Klux Klan hood. Put them on, see what they say. And they're like, holy shit, we're going to give that, she's going down. It was like, without it on, they're like, no, we wouldn't do that. As soon as you put it on, you don't know who, you can't identify people, bam. You find this is one of the worst things on the internet, especially internet sites where there's no way to identify you. If there's anonymity on the web, you find evil shit coming out, okay? But if you have to register and have a username, all of a sudden people tend to be more civil, okay? So anonymity turns us into evil creatures. All right? Group polarization. This is interesting too. So in this study, they gave people a test of prejudice. And they identified some people that were high and some that were low. And then they took the people that were high and they put them together and said, have a conversation, talk to each other about your views on prejudice. And the people who were low, they have to talk together their views on prejudice. And what happened is those that were high in prejudice, after having a conversation with other people high, got worse. And those that were low in prejudice to begin with, they had a conversation with other people, got even lower. So it was like amazing. What happens is if we talk to people that share our ideas, we become more extreme. Does that sound like what's going on in this world today, in the world of politics? All right? You get on the web, and those websites are pretty one opinion oriented. And so this is why we're getting things like abortion center bombings and shit like that. Because the extremists are becoming much more extreme because they have the ability to limit their interactions to only people that think like themselves to begin with. Okay? It is a dangerous situation. Huh? Yeah, look at that. Liberal blogs in blue, conservative blogs in red, and this is, these little chains of connection between them. There's a little bit of overlap between those, but they're pretty much isolated universes out there, okay? And I must tell you, I have looked at some of the red ones just to see what was out there. Oh my God, that is some crazy shit. Of course, they'd probably look at mine and say the same thing, so I guess fair is fair. Groupthink is an interesting thing. This is the idea that in order to achieve some kind of harmony, a group will come to a conclusion. When Japan after World War II, their economy was pretty crushed, right? I mean, they just got defeated in this war. And then somewhere in the 1970s, they really started to have a pretty important business culture. This is when Toyota started to become real famous, and Sony, and some of these other companies. And as these Japanese companies were becoming powerful, they found this problem. And again, it's because, in a lot of ways, because of the conformity problem, because they have so much conformity in Asia. But it was worse than that, because they have a power structure. And so the boss would come into the meeting, and there'd be a team of 10 people. And the boss would say, I think the best thing for this company to do is this. And everyone would say, yes, boss, that's a great idea. Okay? You don't do not, number one, it's the hierarchy thing. You don't talk bad about your boss. Okay? You just don't. All right? But it's also this conformity. So they invented a model in the Japanese business culture where when a decision needs to be made, what they do is they have a very clear rank of hierarchy of the people in that company. I guarantee you they know their social position. They start with the person at the bottom of the social position, give your opinion. Therefore, they move to the next person, and they are free to give an opinion because they don't have to worry about offending this person because they're below them on the social hierarchy. Until finally the boss gives his opinion, his or her opinion. See how I caught myself? His or her opinion just at the end. Pretty powerful idea. Pretty powerful idea that you can avoid this groupthink by allowing everybody to freely express their ideas. Okay? Prejudice and discrimination, no entrance for Poles. Yeah, it's interesting. African American male drinking from colored water, Oklahoma. Oh my God, the Westboro Baptist Church. Did you, oh my Lord, did you ever see these guys? They are the evil sons of bitches. They're going to, when U.S. soldiers were killed in battle and they were being brought back to the United States, when they would be offloading these dead soldiers, these dudes would be out there protesting. He said, God hates fags. And the reason American soldiers are dying is because we allow homosexuality. And, oh my God, can you imagine being the parent of a grieving soldier and all you get is these giant signs in your face, God hates fags? It has absolutely nothing to do with the death of your child. Nothing, okay? Unrelated. Oh my God. Anyway, I just go like that, okay? So prejudice and unjustified, not always negative, but usually negative attitude towards a group. Discrimination is the attitude, discrimination is the behavior, a stereotype is a belief. Okay? So they clearly are connected to each other in a lot of ways, but we clearly have attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs. Okay? Here is an interesting way to see about changes in prejudice across time. So here I have support for interracial dating. Okay? And you see here, this is percent that support interracial dating. And as you can see, as this, as the years change, as you went back to the earliest ones here, look at that, 30% approve of interracial dating. Okay, but even the baby boomers, and that ain't me, even though my kids like to pretend I'm a baby boomer. Sorry, children. All right. And so you see here, it's number one, it's changing across time because there's a shift up. But you see it's generational is really what it goes up. Okay? It's the generations changing. So it's a positive view, right? But I can guarantee you when I brought my Korean fiance home to meet my family, my grandfather was not impressed, all right? They, both of my grandparents made it pretty obvious to me that it was not a good idea. So, a little too late now, Grandpa. So where does prejudice come from, right? And this is pretty powerful, is that social inequality. That if you know how much social inequality is in a country, you'll know how much prejudice there is in a country. It just, the two are highly related. Because rich people need to justify why they're rich. The reason I'm rich and you're poor is I'm good and you're bad. Pretty much sums it up, right? The reason I'm rich and you're poor is, all right? to justify it. I did something right, you did something wrong. Yeah. One of the biggest forms of prejudice, however, is in-group bias. And this is the idea, in our ancestral past, we were cavemen or cave women or whatever, and we would live in a small communal group of about 20. That's about what we would have, about 20. And so if you have resources and you'd like to share those resources, who are you going to share them with? One of the 20 people in your group or somebody from out there? Well, duh, you ain't going to put your resources out in some other group. Why would you ever favor another group? You would, in fact, trust your group, you would share with your group, you would expect that your little tight-knit group is going to be the one that supports you, and your group will look just like you, right? They'll be very similar. And so this notion of an in-group bias is very powerful to favor our own group. And in one study, they took boys that were 9 or 10 years old, and they went to a summer camp. And what they did was, when they got off the bus, they just were like, "You're a grizzly, you're a rattler." They just, as they came off, the one kid would be a grizzly, the next was a rattler. That's it. And then what happened was that very quickly, when they put them onto teams, the Grizzlies against the Rattlers, so quickly the Grizzlies hated the Rattlers. They just hated them, absolutely, those stinky breath boys. They couldn't stand each other. And all it took was just a random placement into. This was done in an incredibly powerful way in the Belgian Congo. It's an area of Africa that was colonized by Belgian people. And when the Belgians came in, they invented 2 different ethnicities, the Hutus and the Tutsis. There's no truth to these ethnicities at all. The Belgians made it that way. You know why the Belgians made it that way? Because the Hutus came to hate the Tutsis. Absolutely hate them. Same thing, it's just artificial. And guess what happened? As long as the Hutus and Tutsis are fighting each other, they don't come back together to fight the Belgian occupiers. They never once fought the Belgians because they were too busy fighting each other. And it turned into, by the way, the Rwandan genocide that happened in the 1990s was the result of the artificially created Hutus and Tutsis that had no basis in truth, except the Belgians just, here, your new identity card will say Hutu on it. That's it. There's nothing else to that truth except that, and it turned into a genocide. Wow, it was bad. Right? So, another thing that happens with prejudice is the notion of scapegoating, that somebody has to be to blame. Okay? During times of frustration, prejudice goes up. And in fact, they've done this historically. They've looked at how prejudice rises and falls across time, and they map it up to the economy. When the economy is bad, prejudice goes up. When the economy is good, prejudice goes down. And so it's like, if my bank account sucks, there's got to be a reason for it. I got to find somebody to explain that. So, pretty powerful right there. All right, so I like some of these ideas here. Now, for a more specific area of social psychology, we can look at aggression. And aggression is burned into our character, right? We find aggression, well, number one, aggression can be physical, verbal, relational. It can be planned. It can be in reaction to somebody else. It can be hostile rage. It can be, coldly calculated. Lots of different forms of aggression. We find aggression is genetically based. It really is. It is tied into our ancestral past. I mean, if you're talking about natural selection, who's more likely to survive and reproduce? The one that's most aggressive and it takes the most resources, right? You've got something I wanted, I bashed you in the head, I now have 2 resources, Okay? I'm more likely to survive if I'm more aggressive. So it's very, very simple. Aggression, in fact, can be selectively bred. You can create, pit bulls? Oh my God. Some dumbass English people, they would fight dogs. They would dig a pit, they would throw two dogs in, and they would fight until one was dead. And guess what? The one that was dead does not have babies, does not pass along their genetic material. The one that lives does. They selectively bred pit bulls for one reason, to kill other dogs. That is why they exist, okay? They were not bred to be a family pet. They were not, I know, we're always going to get it's the environment. No, environment makes it worse, all right? They were literally bred to kill. That is it. That is their purpose for existence. It's not their fault. It's some other stupid asses. But that is why they exist. It has been bred that way. It is tied to genetics, 100%. Identical twins are very, very similar in their levels of aggression compared to other twins. We find males are more prone to aggression. Yes. We find that when it comes to males, not only are males more prone to aggression, I mean, this is just, even if you interact with children even a little bit, you will know that boys make war. Boys fight. Boys are stupid, all right? I'm sorry. You know what boys do? They do, let's do the punching game. Let's see who can punch each other harder. This is a boy thing. It's stupidity. It's in our, okay? Or bloody knuckles. Anybody do that one? All right. Oh my God. Or little boys, they'll pick up a stick and it'll become a gun automatically. Got it? It's just what is going to happen. Boys are stupid. To make it worse is testosterone, right? Now, we know, of course, testosterone is the major hormone that sort of is behind aggression. It's a much more complicated story. But it turns out that testosterone is actually related to aggression. In fact, they take rats, okay? If you put two male rats together, they're going to fight. Okay, great. Now, take those two male rats and snip the nuts right off, and now they don't have any testosterone. And you put the two male rats together, and you know what? No fighting. Great. Now, you give them artificial testosterone to put their testosterone levels back up, and they fight. So it's really pretty straightforward. Fight, no fight, fight. It's just very, very straightforward. Sure. But what you find is that what alcohol does, one of the first parts of the brain that alcohol impacts is the frontal lobes. And you know what the frontal lobes really are good for? Is putting the brakes on our behavior. It allows us to regulate. It allows us to stop and say, if I perform that behavior, what consequence would happen? So, you find when the police are called for domestic violence, it's about 95% of the time somebody's drunk. Okay? About 95% of the time, alcohol is involved in domestic violence calls. We find violence increases on hot days. Look at this. Murders and rapes per day in Houston, Texas, when the temperature is relatively mild, medium, high. So as the temperature goes up, aggression goes up. But pain, heat, crowding, bad smells. I get concerned in Texas a little bit because, you get out onto a Texas road and it's hot Texas summer, the kind where your air conditioner can't even keep up. And there's road work out there, they're putting on new blacktop, the stink that comes up from the blacktop or the tar there. And then, of course, what's going to happen is they got the do, you know what I'm talking about, the sounds and the smells and the heat. And then somebody cuts you off on the road. Yeah, you know what that means? Somebody grabs your gun and shoots you. All right? And it's just a perfectly ordinary person that thought that they had the gun in their glove compartment for nothing but protection on a hot, stinky day with bad noises in the background, snaps. Okay? It's also why I think it's guns on campus. You know, about 4 years ago, the state of Texas required all public universities to allow guns on campus. Did you hear about this one? Scary business. Every single president of every single Texas university said, no thank you, we do not want guns on our campus. The governor of Texas said, tough shit, you will have guns on your campus. Every single private school in Texas was given the option to accept guns on campus or not. 100% of the private universities rejected that option. We refused it, okay? And when this was a conversation we were having, I brought up a student one time in the past. She was the sweetest little girl. I mean, just so precious. And I gave her exam back to her. You know, it's the day after the exam. Give the exam back. And apparently she thought she had done better than that, okay? She just screamed, fuck, as loud as she could. She runs, she just slams the door, and I'm like, all it took is one bad grade to take a sweetie pie little girl and turn her into that raging beast. I mean, she came back and she apologized. She's like, that's not who I am. I can't believe I did that. But that's all it took was one bad grade to get that. Do you see why I think guns on campus are a terrible plan? I'm not worried about a school shooter. I'm not worried about a school shooter. Statistically, the odds of a mass shooting on our campus is essentially zero, okay? That's just how it works. The odds that somebody gets shot because of something like, I had no idea I was going to get angry at that exact second. That's what I'm worried about. We also see, of course, that our society is modeling aggression. You know, the most popular movies, the most popular video games are the violent ones. It's what sells, right? So children are growing up and seeing this stuff. The media out there and the culture that we are raising our children in it's just not, it's not good. In fact, back in the 1960s, somebody noticed that there was just nothing but negative media. That just was almost all bad. So somebody came up with the idea of Sesame Street. All right? Sesame Street was explicitly designed to counteract all the negative media that was out there, to give children at the most influential points a positive model to view. Okay? So, yeah, children learn, you know. We tell them, don't be aggressive, but then we yell at them and spank them. And what do they learn? When I'm frustrated, I should use violence. Okay, that's what mom did. That's what dad did. Yeah, I don't know. But social psychology is interested in the good stuff as well. And in fact, social psychology is fascinating because in its applied forms, it helps us to understand like behavior in a court of law. How witnesses work, how juries work. It helps us to understand behavior in a business setting. Okay, you know, if you want to know something about how the employees are going to work in a factory, you need to know about how they interact with each other. I mean, it's just there are so many different ways. If you want to understand how people vote, you need to look at the social psychology involved. Okay? So anyway, yeah. So here we have, what is this? Attraction. Okay. So turns out that, you know what creates attraction? The number one predictor about who will get married is who lives close to each other. That's it, right? And so the biggest predictor of attraction is proximity combined with exposure. It turns out that the more times that you're exposed to something, the more comfortable you are with it. And it doesn't matter if it's a new food, a new person, a new song, a new show, doesn't matter. The more times you get exposed, the better you feel about it. Sure? Look at that. Met online. Of course, part of attractiveness is physical attractiveness. And it's interesting that in the United States, anyway, that people that are physically attractive, and it's really weird, when we talk about physically attractive, in some ways there is a cultural definition of what equals attractive, what is an attractive person. But babies, really young babies, they'll take two pictures and they'll show them to adults and say, which one is more attractive? And they'll figure out what adults believe. Then they'll show it to kids that are like 3 months old, and these babies will spend almost all their time looking at the attractive picture, whatever the adults say. So there's some kind of truth to what it means to be physically attractive. It's in there somewhere, because I mean, a 3-month-old baby already knows what it means. Okay? What happens is that people that are physically attractive are usually treated differently in a lot of ways. There's this assumption that, oh, if somebody's physically attractive, then they're a good person or something that way. They're healthy, they're happy, things of this nature. Okay? But some people do not, and they get mistrusted, etc. When it comes to physical attractiveness, men find an attractive woman to be one who is young and therefore able to have lots of babies. You know what women tend to find is physically attractive? Maturity, masculinity, and wealth. Yeah. But yet at the same time, there is other things that are attractive. It turns out around the world, symmetry. You know, your face is supposed to be even on one side and the other side. People that don't really completely match that well are considered unattractive. Right? Universally, the more match there is along the midline, the more attractive the face is. So when it comes to attraction, do you think opposites attract? Definitely not. Remember proximity? Chances are you're going to marry somebody that lives within 5 miles of you, and if they live within 5 miles of you, they probably share an awful lot of similar characteristics as you. And then, because we just saw with group polarization, the more time you spend with them, the more similar you become. Right? So, oh man! All right? So opposites attract is not true. That just isn't true. Okay? We just enjoy spending time around people that have similar attitudes, beliefs, humor, interest, intelligence, age, education, income. In fact, this is a true story. I bought a house last year, okay? And as part of the offer, I put in a letter. You know, a letter saying how I love the house, what I would do, and everything like this. And it turned out that they got these offers on their house, and mine was not the highest offer. I was like $50,000 below the highest offer. But they would not sell to that person with the highest offer because, are you ready for this? And I am not joking, they told me this truth. They knew for a fact they were a Trump supporter. I am not joking. They would not sell their house to that person. They looked me up. They found out I was a psychology professor, therefore I was most likely a liberal and probably, in fact, did not support the job. And that is literally why they sold me the house for $50,000 less than their highest bid. I'm just like, damn. Who do we like? People with similar feelings and attitudes and beliefs, okay? That is amazing. Okay. So attraction obviously can take one step further and turn into love. Passionate love, strong attraction, excitement, things of this nature, physiological arousal at its earliest stages, heart pounding. Oh my goodness. Oh, I want her. Okay. Later on, companionate love might develop. So this notion of a commitment to each other, attachment, shared bonds with each other, things of this nature. Okay? It turns out that in the United States, the majority of the weddings, marriages in America are based on passionate love. Okay? Number one, passionate love goes away. It does. It does not last. The notion of marriage based on passionate love is just stupid. All right? It is the stupidest thing I could possibly imagine. In many parts of the world, you know, they have arranged marriages. Y'all know a little bit about arranged marriages. Turns out in India they have both kind of arranged and kind of a love marriage, right? So what happens is they score them on how much they love each other. And in the first couple of years, those that are in a more of a choice marriage, they love each other more than an arranged marriage. But then what happens is if you track them across about 7 years, those in this passionate love marriage, love go do, 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 do. Those in an arranged marriage, love go do, 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 do. All right? So it increases across time. The key to an arranged marriage is you don't just roll the dice and put two people together. Okay? Somebody uses some real, to guarantee that this love will develop. They ensure that you share common features, you share things in common. I feel very confident that whoever wrote the algorithms for the dating websites probably went to the old traditional matchmakers and figured out how did they make matches and used that, in fact, Match.com, right? That is how they did it. So I heard another one I heard there was a Korean dating site that you pay based on the outcome of the match. And so if you get married, you have to pay a certain amount of money. But then it was like, if the husband's occupation is this, you pay more. If it's this, you pay even more. And so you have to pay a fee based on how successful it was. But I also heard another one in India not too long ago that they never met each other. Okay? And the bride, oh yeah, he's got an MBA, he's successful, and they never met until they get up to the wedding, and she just goes to, what's 7 times 8? I don't know. Wedding off. So, it happens. Okay, altruism is an interesting thing. Altruism is this notion that we help another person without ever expecting to get anything in return. Okay? Now, one part of me would like to believe that altruism is true, that altruism exists, this unselfish regard for the welfare of other people. I don't believe it. I mean, I would like to believe it. But, you know, like, say, for example, Mother Teresa, she's a saint, right? She's been sainted. You know, Mother Teresa, she went to Calcutta, India. She's taken the poorest of the poor, and she's pulling them out. I mean, she is so altruistic. Oh my God, she's a saint, right? I argue this. I mean, we're all selfish creatures. You know, it's like, you go to the grocery store and you go, okay, that item costs $2, and I'm going to make a rational decision that the amount of value I receive from that item is more than the $2 I'm going to lose. And I argue Mother Teresa did the same thing. She received value when she helped people, an internal sense of goodness or moral rightness, you know, something of this nature. She didn't do it for nothing. She didn't do it, she did get something from it. She felt good about herself. She felt she was fulfilling God's goals or something. I don't know what she was thinking. But in my opinion, Mother Teresa is just as selfish as you and I are. Okay? She makes a rational decision, except that when she makes a rational decision and makes judgments, maybe she doesn't put dollars and cents into the judgment. She uses internal sense of goodness. How is that any different than I got $10? You know, it's just the same. You're just making a rational decision, cost benefit, and she just made a cost benefit analysis that we view as somehow saintly. But anyway, I don't know. All right, here was a crazy situation. Here's Kitty Genovese. She's a manager of a bar in Queens, New York. It was like 1963. She's coming home at 3 o'clock in the morning. She goes to park her car, but it's New York City. Clearly, you got to park like 3 blocks away. So she parks her car. She's walking to her apartment. On the way, she gets attacked by Winston Moses, a known convicted felon out on parole. And now she's screaming, right? Oh my God, he's killing me. Okay? People open their windows and yell, hey, leave that girl alone. Winston Mosey runs off. She's bloody and shit. Guess what? He comes back and he's attacking her, he's stabbing her, he's raping her. Hey, get out of here! He leaves again. He comes back a third time and kills her. Okay? And at the end, they said 38 people witnessed the attack. 38 people saw it happen. Nobody called the police. One person did after she was dead. Okay? When this story was first published in the New York Times, it was on like page 40 or something. It was buried way back. And some people found that thing, and that story became front page news. Because it was like, what are we as people? What are we that? I mean, number one, Manhattan, or New York as a whole is a shithole. So I'm not surprised it happened in New York. Okay? Just a shithole. Queens is slightly better than Manhattan, but not by much. And it just was like, what happened? And so number one, we call this diffusion of responsibility. That the more people there are around, the less likely they are to help. Okay? And so that's all fine and dandy, but why? What the hell is going on here? And so here's the deal, is that there was a lot of research to figure this out. And you know, I mean, don't get me wrong, I mean, just like it doesn't make sense to say all German people are fundamentally evil, it doesn't make sense to say all New Yorkers are evil. Right? 38 people watched and they were, what, vicious sons of bitches that didn't care about human life? I don't believe that. Okay? I believe they're perfectly normal people that just fell victim to the circumstance. So number one, the thing that has to happen in order for helping to occur, or intervention, okay, is you have to notice. So if 38 people, in fact, witnessed this, you got to imagine 150 people were still sleeping. Okay? So clearly 150 people aren't going to help because they didn't even notice it was happening. Okay, cool. Interprets the incident as an emergency. Yeah, it's Queens, New York. What does it really mean if, oh, he's killing me? Is that just a melodramatic phrase? Or does it literally mean I'm being killed? Right? Is it, you know, oh, it's a prostitute and her pimp? Is it, you know, and I can imagine a whole lot of people hearing, oh, he's killing me, as not an emergency. Okay? Because people use melodramatic phrases all the time, you know. It is what it is. This next one is a big hurdle, okay? And that is, do you assume responsibility? And can you imagine you're looking down and you're seeing this happen. And you're like, I believe that is in fact an emergency, but should I be the one to help? And here's the deal. They'll be like, well, let's see. She definitely needs medical attention. And I see her, and I know she's a nurse. Okay? She's a nurse, so clearly she's more qualified to help than I am, right? So I'm stepping back. Meanwhile, the nurse is looking out going, that dude's got a knife. Are you kidding me? Look at him. I know he goes to the gym every single day. He clearly has more ability than I do, okay? So this is what's going on here, is that, you know, they're just, and I mean, even at this point, you know what happens when you want to figure out if it's an emergency is you're going to look at the person next to you and go, are they panicking? If they're not panicking, it must not be an emergency. I mean, look at this person. They're not panicking. It's not an emergency. And guess what they're doing? They're looking at you. And you're not panicking. It must not be an emergency. So we're looking at each other to determine whether or not it is an emergency. Okay? And so in the end, you know, we only help if boom, da-boom, da-boom, da-boom. And it's like, if you're going to have a heart attack and need medical care, make sure you do it in a room with only one other person. That one person will help you. If it's two people, they'll stand around, look at each other, and go, what are we supposed to do? Okay? That's the answer. So in first aid, apparently what they teach in first aid is when an emergency happens, the person administering first aid gives very clear instructions to people. Okay? You call 911. You get me a rag. You do this. Okay? Because if you don't give very clear instructions, people will just kind of look at each other and say, what are we going to do? Boom. All right, good. So I love the social psychology, and I hope I can get it back again, because Dr. Henderson is getting close to retirement age. I'm not saying out the door, Dr. Henderson, but I'm saying I want the class. So, no class on Thursday, but exam on Tuesday. Do not forget the quiz that's left on Monday. And remember, there is that study guide thing that is due after the exam, but I mean, it is your best interest to prepare it before the exam. All right? Okay, let me grab the rest of the attendance that came in after